Hi everyone. I'm going to start with reading Muggy Maggie. So if you have not yet read chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4, I'm going to go ahead and be recording all of those videos today. So if you have not read it or if you would like to read it again, please go get your copies so you can follow along with me. Remember, a good reader follows along with their eyes or their fingers while someone else is reading. So feel free to grab your copy. If you need to, pause me and go get it. And then we're going to get started. Okay, so we've read a chapter from Ramona when we were doing in our Journeys book, The Extra Good Sunday. So this is actually from the same author, Beverly Cleary. And growing up, she was one of my favorites. If you ask your parents, some of them may remember the Ramona series. It was mine and Mrs. Purdy's favorite, or one of our favorites. So this one's called Muggy Maggie. And when we look at the front, right, we know that a good reader can sometimes make predictions about things that they see either in pictures or on the front cover of a book. So when we look at the front cover of our book, okay, we can see that we see a girl. She looks fairly young. We see that she's holding some kind of piece of paper. She looks like she's maybe like scratching her head. Maybe she's confused about something. Maybe she's not sure, right? We don't really know. But she's looking kind of confused to me. We can see like her mouth is kind of making a little like, oh, right? That maybe is kind of a face that we would make if we were confused. If we look over here, we can see that on the door it says Mrs. Leeper, 3rd grade. So if we think about our background knowledge and what we know that on the front of my door, well, actually to the side of it, that I have my Mrs. Flores 3rd grade sign, and it has Minnie and Mickey on it. And so that tells everyone that that classroom belongs to Miss Flores. So that makes me think that maybe we have some kind of an office or a classroom, and especially with a child being there. And the words 3rd grade, that's telling me it's probably a classroom. So what we can kind of use about our background knowledge is, what kind of an adult would be in a classroom? Well, probably a teacher. So it makes me think that maybe this is a teacher peeking out in the hallway, and then we have a student maybe here trying to figure something out. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to read chapter 1 in this video, and then I'm going to stop it, and you can turn to the next video. That way it's easier for you to find them and I can label them. So this one's going to be for chapter 1. And just follow along while I read, and make sure you're paying attention to the pictures and seeing if we can find out any clues as we read. Chapter 1. After her first day in the 3rd grade, Maggie Schultz jumped off the school bus when it stopped at her corner. "Bye, Joanne," she called to the girl who was her best friend, sometimes. "See you tomorrow." Maggie was happy to escape from 6th grade boys who called her a cootie, and from 4th grade boys who insisted the 3rd grade was awful, cursive writing hard, and Mrs. Leeper, the teacher, mean. Well, what we were thinking, right, what we were inferring about the front cover does seem to be right. Okay, that seems to be a teacher named Mrs. Leeper, and we're finding out that she is a student and she's on the school bus. If we look at the picture on page 1, we see a little girl running with her dog. So maybe we'll find out what that means in a minute. Her dog Kisser was waiting for her. When Maggie knelt to hug him, Kisser licked her face. He was a young, eager dog the Schultzes had chosen from the SPCA's Pick-a-Pet page in the newspaper. A friendly cockapoo looking for a child to love was the description under his picture, a description that proved to be right. "Come on, Kisser." Maggie ran home with her hair flying and her dog springing along beside her. That's a really good example of using interesting words, right? They could have said that the dog was walking. They could have said the dog was running, but saying her dog was springing along makes me think of someone maybe on a trampoline, which is a pretty silly thought. But for any of you who have a dog, especially like a young dog, like a puppy, they really do spring along. Belle always tries to jump, and it looks like she's skipping because she's so happy to be walking outside with me. Come on, Kisser. Maggie ran home with her hair flying and her dog springing along beside her. We can make a picture in our head. When Maggie and Kisser burst through the kitchen door, her mother said, "Hi there, Angel Face. How did things go today?" She held Kisser away from the refrigerator with her foot while she put away milk cartons and vegetables. Mrs. Schultz was good at standing on one foot because 5 mornings a week she taught exercise classes. "Mrs. Leeper is nice, sort of," began Maggie, "except she didn't make me a monitor, and she put Joanne at a different table." "Too bad," said Mrs. Schultz. Maggie continued. "Courtney sits on one side of me and Kelly on the other, and that Kirby Jones, who sits across from me, kept pushing the table into my stomach." "And what did you do?" Mrs. Schultz was taking eggs out of a carton and setting them in the white plastic egg tray in the refrigerator. "Pushed it back." Maggie thought a moment before she said, "Mrs. Leeper said we are going to have a happy 3rd grade." "That's nice." Mrs. Schultz smiled as she closed the refrigerator, but Maggie was doubtful about a teacher who forecast happiness. So we might want to stop and think a little bit whether or not we think it's going to be a happy experience for her, right? So she's basically saying that she's not sure if someone can tell her whether or not it's going to be a good experience at school. And I can understand that, right? It's hard to figure out what our feelings are going to be, but I think sometimes when we set a goal for ourselves, that could be really important. So one of my goals every school year is to make sure that my students have a happy 3rd grade. And so it's not so much a forecast of feelings, more so a goal that I set for me and my students. How did she know? Still, Maggie wanted her teacher to be happy. "Kisser needs exercise," Mrs. Schultz said. "Why don't you take him outside and give him a workout?" Maggie's mother thought everyone, dogs included, needed exercise. Maggie enjoyed chasing Kisser around the backyard, ducking, dodging, and throwing a dirty tennis ball, wet with dog spit, for him until he collapsed, panting, and she was out of breath from running and laughing. So it sounds like they're having fun. This might be something that some of you are doing at home. While we're kind of stuck at home, right? But going out to play with your pet in the backyard is sometimes a good way to get some exercise. I don't have a backyard with a fence, so my dogs can't go out there by themselves, but I have been taking them on really long walks and playing ball in the house with them. Refreshed and much more cheerful, Maggie was flipping through television channels with the remote control, trying to find funny commercials, when her dad came home from work. "Daddy, Daddy," she cried, running to meet him. He picked her up, kissed her, and asked, "How's my Goldilocks?" When he set her down, he kissed his wife. And then we can see a picture of Maggie running around with Kisser playing a ball in the backyard. And even though there's a picture there, we were also able to make a picture with in our heads, because she did such a good job of describing the dirty tennis ball with the slobbery spit on it, and describing how they were laughing and jumping, right, and out of breath and panting and giggling. So those were all really good descriptions. So keep that in mind when you're writing your journal and trying to tell me about maybe your day or something you would do. The more descriptive words we can use, the better the reader can make a picture in their mind. "Tired?" Mrs. Schultz asked. "Traffic gets worse every day," he answered. "Was it your turn to make the coffee?" demanded Maggie. "That's right," grumped Mr. Schultz, half pretending. Now, if we think about what we are learning in grammar this year, right, one of the things that we've talked about, one of the things that Ms. Von Berg did a really nice lesson on was using dialogue, right, in your writing. And if you notice, we know that when we have talking words, we need to put quotation marks, right? And the quotation marks are the things that look like this in the sky next to your words. And we also talked about how there has to be punctuation or a comma, and then we need a tag, right? Who said it? And we don't always want to use the word said, because that can be kind of boring. So if we look, we can see that at the top, right, it says Mrs. Schultz asked. And then we see that it says he answered. And then Maggie demanded. And then Mr. Schultz grumped, right? So that's 4 different examples of words that we can use instead of said that maybe are just a little bit more interesting. Other than talking with people who came to see him, Maggie did not really understand what her father did in his office. She did know he made coffee every other day because Miss Madden, his secretary, said she did not go to work in an office to make coffee. He should take his turn. Miss Madden was such an excellent secretary, one who could spell, punctuate, and type. All important things for third graders to know, too. That Mr. Schultz put up his share of coffee making. Maggie found this so funny that she always asked about the coffee. "Did Miss Madden send me a present?" Maggie asked. Her father's secretary often sent Maggie a little present. A tiny bottle of shampoo from a hotel, a free sample of perfume, and once an eraser shaped like a duck. Maggie felt grown up when she wrote thank you notes on their home computer. So that's one of the activities that I had suggested to you or to your parents. That might be fun while you're at home, is you can take some turns writing emails to family members or to me or to Miss Vonberg. And that's a great way to get writing practice and typing practice. Not today, Mr. Schultz tousled Maggie's hair and went to change into his jogging clothes. When dinner was on the table and the family, exercised, happy, and hungry, was seated, Maggie chose the right moment to break her big news. "We start cursive this week," she said with a gusty sigh. That was supposed to impress her parents with the hard work that lay ahead. Instead, they laughed. Maggie was annoyed. Cursive was serious. She tossed her hair, which was perfect for tossing, waving, and curling to her shoulders, the sort of hair that made women say, "What wouldn't you give for hair like that?" Or, in sad voices, "I used to have hair that color." "Don't look so gloomy," said Maggie's father. "You'll survive." How did he know? Maggie scowled. Ooh, that's a word we already know. That was one of our vocabulary words. So right now, make a scowling face, right? Like, oh, right? Not happy, like, I'm so mad at you. So if your parents are asking you to clean your room or do your work that I've sent, right? Some of you might be making a scowl, but let's try to be nice. This was still hurting from being laughed at and said, "Cursive is dumb. It's all wrinkled and stuck together, and I can see why I am supposed to do it." This was a new thought that popped into her mind at that moment. "Because everyone writes cursive," said Mrs. Schultz, "or almost everybody." "But I can write print, or I can use the computer," said Maggie, arguing mostly just to be arguing. "I'm sure you'll enjoy cursive once you start," said Mrs. Schultz in that brisk, positive way that always made Maggie feel contrary. Well, that's a word that we talked about with Ramona, right? We talked about that when you feel contrary, that you might be feeling a little bit sassy, right? Maybe you're talking back, or maybe you just don't want to agree with everyone. And those are feelings that a lot of kids feel when their parents are telling them that something's going to be fun, and maybe they don't think so. And when this book was written, they were required to learn cursive at school. And nowadays, some schools teach cursive and some schools don't. I know a lot of you practice cursive in second grade. When I taught second grade, I taught cursive. And I had some cursive practice for us set up for the end of the year. So hopefully we'll be back to school soon and we'll get to do our cursive practice. "I will not enjoy it," thought Maggie, and she said, "All those loops and squiggles, I don't think I'll do it." "Of course you will," said her father. "That's why you go to school." This made Maggie even more contrary. "I am not going to write cursive, and nobody can make me, so there." "Ho, ho," said her mother, so cheerfully that Maggie felt 3 times as contrary. Mr. Schultz's smile flattened into a straight line. So if we think about that and we make a picture in our head, right? First he was laughing and he was smiling, and then his face was like, right? And if you see your parents' face turn like that, or if you see my face turn like that, or any other teacher at school, right? You probably know that we're not feeling very happy with how you're talking to us. "Just get busy, do what your teacher says, and learn it." The way her father spoke pushed Maggie further into contrariness. She stabbed her fork into her baked potato so the handle stood up straight. Then she broke off a piece of her beef patty with her fingers and fed it to Kisser. "Maggie, please," said her mother. "Your father has had a hard day, and I haven't had such a great day myself." After teaching her exercise classes in the morning, Mrs. Schultz spent her afternoons running errands for her family. Dry cleaner, bank, gas station, market, post office. Maggie pulled her fork out of her baked potato. Kisser licked his chops and looked up at her with hope in his brown eyes, his tail wagging. Kisser is lucky, she said. He doesn't have to learn cursive. When her dog heard his name, he stood up and placed his front paws on her lap. Now you're being silly, Maggie, said her father. Down, Kisser, you old nuisance. Maggie was indignant. Kisser is not a nuisance. Kisser is a loving dog, she informed her father. Don't try to change the subject. Mr. Schultz, irritated with Maggie, smiled at his wife, who was pouring him a cup of coffee. And if we look at the picture, we can see that Maggie is looking very grumpy, right? Very contrary. And her fork is standing up in her baked potato. And Kisser is waiting for her to feed him some more food from the table, right? Human food. And if you have a dog, right, you know that even though sometimes we can give them maybe a little piece of something for a little treat, it's not really healthy to give them human food all the time. And it's definitely not healthy to give them everything. Some things dogs can't eat. So, a lot of times adults really don't want dogs coming too close to the table because they don't want them to eat something that might make them sick. Books are not written in cursive, Maggie pointed out. I can read chapter books, and not everyone in my class is good at that. Mr. Schultz sipped his coffee. True, he admitted, but many things are written in cursive. Memos, many letters, grocery lists, checks, lots of things. I can write letters in printing, and I never write those other things, argued Maggie, so I am not going to learn cursive. And we can see those letters are written in what's called italics, which is slanted writing. And that just means that maybe she's really saying it strong, right? She's kind of being fresh. She tossed her hair and asked to be excused. Kisser felt that he too was excused. He trotted after Maggie and jumped up on her bed. As she hugged him, Maggie overheard her mother say, I don't know what gets into Maggie. Most of the time she behaves herself, and then suddenly she doesn't. Contrary kid, said her father. So, as we finish chapter 1, we might start to think about some of the things that we know about Maggie, right? Maybe some character traits. So she obviously seems very stubborn, right? She has her opinions and doesn't seem to want to listen to other people and maybe be open to trying new things, right? So maybe she's a little afraid that she won't be good at it. She does seem to be very proud that she's good at a lot of things like typing and writing, print, and reading chapter books. She's very loving, right? She takes care of Kisser. She's responsible. She took him outside to play for his exercise, right? So she's being a good pet owner. So part of that is being responsible. Her mom at the end says that normally she's a very, very good kid, right? So we know that for the most part she's well behaved, even though she can be a little fresh and sassy. That's why her father's saying, she's being contrary. And we know that maybe she doesn't like it when other people tease her, right? Because they kind of talks about that in the beginning, and she doesn't like being called a cootie by the boys, right? Even though hopefully they're just teasing her and it's not that serious. But nobody really likes to be teased, right? So maybe she's a little sensitive, though. We're not really sure, okay? But she does seem to be very sweet, right? She writes the thank you notes if she gets a present from her dad's secretary, and she is very interested and talkative, right? She was telling her mom all about her day. She was asking her dad and mom how their day was. So those are all some character traits, right, that we observed while we were reading chapter 1. Now, if you think about it, the author never said that she was all of those things. Those are things that we had to infer, right? We had to draw conclusions to see what we thought of her. There were a few things that they said outright when they talked about her being contrary, right? But some of the other things we had to figure out for ourselves. And so as we're thinking about the chapter 1 comprehension questions, if you haven't done them yet, you're going to want to be thinking about all of these things that we're talking about, things you noticed in the pictures, things you noticed in the words. And, sometimes we have to look a little bit hard in the text. It's almost like a scavenger hunt, right? We've talked about that before. Not everything is going to be right on top of the page. Sometimes we have to stop. We have to make a picture in our head, right? We have to visualize. And then we have to try to figure out what the author was trying to tell us. And sometimes the best way to do that is to start small, right? We think about story elements like Miss Von Berg taught us the last week we were at school. And we talked about the characters, right? And the setting. And we know so far we have the characters mostly of Maggie and her parents and Kisser, although we heard a couple names here and there, whether she was talking about her day or on the bus. We heard of the father's secretary. We heard of her teacher, even though she's new, she's still a character. And then we can think about character traits. We know that the setting so far is the school bus, her house, her backyard. They talked a little bit about Dad's office and Mom's exercise class. So those are settings as well. And then we can start to think about, okay, what is the sequence of events that's happened so far? Maggie's not happy about having to learn cursive. And then we'll be able to connect that to the events that happen in chapter 2. So if you're ready to read chapter 2, feel free to start the chapter 2 video. If you are still working on chapter 1, please take time today to finish your questions after listening to this video, and then you'll be ready to start the chapter 2 video later on today or tomorrow. I'm going to get off and start a fresh video, and then I will start chapter 2 for you guys. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I miss you guys so much, and so does Miss Von Berg. So I will hopefully talk to you guys later, and I hope you're ready for chapter 2. Have a great day, guys. Bye.